from Shirley. It's called Sacred Oath. I honor and respect all things, for they are sacred. I have chosen to be here in this place and time so that I may support others. May the world be a better place for my presence in it. The universe is infinite in its abundance. I shall support others to learn this simple truth. May all that I desire come to pass, for I know that I am deserving of this. Fear shall not guide my thoughts and actions, as I am a being of light, and where there is light, darkness cannot exist. My intention shall produce an outcome for the greater good. I am whole, complete, and perfect. Let my love and courage illuminate my path so that others may follow. My greatest gifts are the ability to love and the ability to create. I shall share these gifts always. Love and light always. It's a nice sentiment.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And we have the lovely Kari Kilgore, author extraordinaire, to interview today, which I'm very excited about. You're going to unmute yourself, Kari? Okay, good.
No, I figured I would just type it out.
Nice. Well, are we ready to just launch in?
Sure.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about yourself pre-author, before you became an author, Kari.
Well, I remember my entire life making up stories to entertain myself, whether it was, I remember very clearly being in the car with my parents in the 70s when you might be laying in the window in the back looking and no car seats, just telling myself stories. Or in school, if I had crayons, my crayons were doing things, or I would use my fingers. That's always been a part of me. But I kind of veered into tech support, did a lot of work with computers. I was a network engineer for a while, did desk side support, did phone support. And it wasn't really until I moved back, that was in Atlanta, moved back home to here in the Virginia mountains and started doing consulting work, but I was helping publish my uncle's nonfiction books back in 2004. Then a little later on, shifted more into working with him. And around 2011, I started writing my first novel. And that was really the start of it. I published fiction for the first time in 2016 and didn't really start publishing until 2018. That was a shift that writing and publishing became more important. And all along, I was working with him, publishing his nonfiction, but I started to focus more on my own fiction.
Nice. Thank you. I didn't know some of that for sure. So, what made you want to write? Like, what inspired you?
It was built in. I really do think we all tell ourselves stories all the time. Think about dreaming. We're telling ourselves stories in our sleep. And we see our dogs and cats do that when they sleep. They're telling themselves stories. Or when they play with this little ball is not a mouse, but you ask that cat, that's a mouse. Or the dogs see a leaf and they chase the leaf. It's not a leaf to them. They're telling themselves stories. So I think it's built into humans. But and again, this goes back to my childhood. Even as a kid, playing with other kids, I would usually direct the story. Okay, we're gonna do well. All right, well, you're this person, you're this person, and do this and do this. I honestly think it was built in. What really inspired me was around, I want to say 2014, 2015, I read Wool by Hugh Howey and just loved the book. It's a TV show now on HBO or Apple called Silo. And I got to the end of Wool and loved it so much and saw that he had published it himself. And I'm holding this proper book in my hand. It doesn't look like something mimeographed. Again, I'm old enough to remember what that is. It didn't look like something you ran off yourself. It was a book, a proper hardcover, completely produced book. And I can do that. And that was really where it took off because I'd already had experience publishing these nonfiction books, which are far more complex than I mean, one of them is 300 pages and had 1,200 images. That's how I really got good at page layout. A fiction book, simple compared to that. So I just happened to have the experience to do it. And once I saw that book and realized, oh, this is within reach. I don't have to go try to go through a traditional publisher and deal with the gatekeepers and give up the rights to my stories. I could actually do this. And that was the huge inspiration. That also got me writing more. That's one great thing about independent publishing is no one's telling you you can only publish 2 books a year. Watch me. So that is very inspiring. It frees up my creativity.
Nice. So was when you were working with your uncle on his nonfiction book when you knew you wanted to be an author?
Oh no, I've known that forever.
Oh, okay.
It was one of those things I always wanted to do and just kind of put on the back burner, especially as a young professional in Atlanta in the 90s when you could get a computer job by showing up and saying, hey, I can do it, which doesn't mean I wasn't good at it. I was very good at it, still am. But I kind of got sidetracked because of fear that, oh, that's not a real job. You can't make a living doing that. You're just going to waste your potential. And because I was good at tech support, I had to do it. I had to break through that. Oh, yeah, a lot of things I'm good at that I don't want to do, that I've evolved far enough. Like my father taught me how to do things like change the oil in my cars, which I could do, but I don't want to. I'd rather let someone else do that. So it's just that awareness of I don't have to do these things I'm good at. But that tech support background is a huge reason why I can figure out the publishing software and just jump in and do it because I'm not afraid. I know I can figure out software.
Nice. Nice. So, you know, you realized when you were in tech that you thought you could make a living doing this as writing?
No, it was really when I picked up when I finished that book Wool, because
Oh, and you saw his book. Okay.
I thought in my back of my mind, oh, you have to go through New York publisher, you have to go through, and that can take 4 and 5 years to get one book out. And then you start the second book, and then you're years down the road, and your copyright is gone, and so many things that we can do as independent publishers we can't do with a traditional publisher. And so yeah, it was really realizing I can do this myself. I don't have to spend all this time. That really freed me up. Okay, it can be as big as I want it to be.
Nice. And is it easy for you to make a living at this now, or do you still struggle at times?
I don't pay all of my bills with writing, although this year's been a big bump up. It's just like the thing about writing is writing fiction in particular, it's still a long road, but you have control over how quickly you get there. I mean, it's still, you may as well bet on 10 years, which in a long lifespan, especially if you're doing something you love, that's a reasonable thing to do. Because think how many careers work that way. You spend 12 years in school or, all these years in an apprenticeship, which is great. There's nothing wrong with any of that. But it's sort of like an apprenticeship, learning along the way. So I've started to see each year the income and the sales ticking up, which is exciting. That's exactly what you want to see.
Nice, nice. And you kind of answered part of this, but my next question is like, what kept you going until it became a living for you, until you got published or self-published? And did you always self-publish?
What kept me going was understanding that the storytelling is fun, that I'm, as one of our teachers says, you sit in a room and write stuff up or make stuff up. What's not fun about that? You're telling yourself stories, just like I did when I was a kid playing with my crayons. I write the things I want to read. And when it's going really well, it feels like reading a story. It's just that story happens to be going through my fingertips. And that's very exciting. I I keep going because I want to know what happens next. And I keep going because I enjoy it's fun to have that reader interaction, because to me, a story's not really finished until someone else reads it,
Mm,
like a connection. And something that's magical about it is I can read a book from hundreds of years ago, and there's a connection with that writer's mind, which is just incredible. Or, someone's been recently buying my books in Germany. And I'm just, that's so interesting because, I've had sales in Australia, Japan, all over the place. And not hundreds and hundreds, but I'll notice that one sale. Gosh, someone bought my book in Singapore. How cool. There's a mental connection between us, even though we will never meet. And that's amazing to me.
That's really cool. That makes me think, do you have somebody who you have read your books before you publish?
I have my trusted first readers, my husband Jason, who is also a writer in his in he's also he has a full-time job. He's also a nerd. That's how we met. He does tech support for the Commonwealth of Virginia. But that's having a trusted first reader is important. I'm not a big fan of developmental editors and for fiction in particular, or a group of people who have to tell me if my story's good. I wrote the story to please me. And if the story pleases me, and Jason can read it and okay, I caught these typos or there might be one or two points I was confused on. I'll fix it. I'll fix that and then it goes out because I'm the faster I get it out, the faster I go to the next story. And then I get to tell myself another story.
Do you have like a fan base that's like built for you that you know of? Do you get what kind of feedback are you getting from readers and what kind of feedback do you enjoy the most?
I have a newsletter that's it's very small and I had not been great at sending out consistently. They've recently changed their format on their website, so it's much more usable. It was the simplest thing. I would have a whole bunch of text and I couldn't put any images into the bottom. And that drove me nuts to the point of I didn't even want to do the newsletter. But now they've changed it so I can, if I describe one of our cats, I can put the picture there. And that little simple thing, it's like being able to publish my books. It freed up my creativity. It's like, oh, now this is fun. That's one of the tricks for me is once I find something to make it fun, it gets a lot easier. But as far as fans, they're local folks who know about our writing, that it's fun to interact with. I do get emails from time to time, comments on Facebook. Um, one of the most striking ones that I've never forgotten that reminds me, even though I do write for myself, there's a reader on the other side of that page. My very first novel that I published called Until Death was at its heart about a man losing his wife. And a whole lot of other things happened. But I got an email just out of the blue from a man who read it who had just recently lost his wife. And he was very appreciative and said, you really hit that journey. You really touched on how it felt. And I was just, first of all, overwhelmed that someone in that position had read that book. I mean, of course, the odds are that it will happen, but it was still unexpected. And I was so grateful that he took the time to reach out because there's that connection. And what I hope is that was helpful to him in some way to realize, this is a process and it's a difficult process and honor that transition that he had to go through. And, one of the most fun things though is the thought of letting someone escape. I feel like writing is service. It's entertainment. Entertainment is service. It's my form of ministry. If you look at the word minister, it's just to provide a service at its most basic level. And one of the services I can provide is an escape or a laugh or I love writing romance, especially short romance. That little that little thrill you get of the when you meet somebody, that connection. So those and we write a lot of holiday stories that are a lot of fun or crimes or mysteries depending on the mood, but letting someone escape, letting someone just hear a story and lose themselves in the words. I feel like that is a way to be of service.
Nice. I like that. What currently inspires you, your writing, and where do you get your inspiration?
Oh gosh. Um, it's all over the place. A short story I recently finished. It's kind of silly. Just a video I was watching about an emu laying an egg. And I talked to my sister-in-law about it, and she said, "Oh, it's such a pretty egg. It looked like a dragon." And it just occurred to me, oh, because this is an emu that has an attitude, and emus are kind of tough anyway. And I just thought, oh, an airborne emu, yeah, that would really be a dragon. The emu happened to have the same name as my mother-in-law, Karen, and my brain said, my mother-in-law airborne, trying to get us to have kids. That's just the clicks that my brain, there's just some bizarre connection. And so I wrote a short story called The Night of the Tactical Attack Storks.
Nice.
And they were airborne, the ones who had children who didn't want to have kids. So we'll just drop one on your house. So it was very lighthearted, but just the oddest connections. That's one thing. Paying attention is a huge part of writing, especially fiction and nonfiction too, of course. But just, reading things or seeing things. I was walking through the kitchen one day years ago, and there was a story on NPR about the multiverse and how physicists are getting to the point of, God, the multiverse is real. We're so close to having that proof. And my brain was like, okay, and took off with another story where the multiverse is anchored in Atlanta because Atlanta used to be called Terminus, the meeting point. So it's everywhere. Jason's gotten an idea from flipping through the dictionary, or you find something on your shelf. We did one of the days I led the service, we did just looking around your room and picking something to write a story from. And I had a little rock on my shelf, and that novel is going to come out soon that was based on this little rock. So it's just being observant and paying attention and letting your brain make those connections.
Nice. Nice. Do you feel like you had to cultivate that, like letting your brain make those connections and then actually like letting the story develop?
One thing I think a lot of us have to cultivate is not stopping ourselves. That when that weird idea by my mother-in-law flying overhead dropped, it could have been very easy for me to say, oh, that's too silly. I couldn't possibly, or that's going to offend somebody or whatever. What I've gotten better at over the years is protecting that creative urge. The way I see it is there's a writing machine in my head that's working all the time, whether I'm paying attention to it or not. And who runs it is this little toddler, and she is excited about everything. She just, she's the kid who wants to tear her clothes off and run down the street because she just can. And she'll see the weirdest thing and go, wouldn't that be fun? And it's my job as the adult who can work the keyboard to say, yeah, that would be fun. Let's do it. I don't want to be that scolding parent, which is important when you actually have a toddler. You have to teach them to keep their clothes on, and you have to teach them not to run out in the street. But that's not what's going on here. I'm the protector of that little girl, and I so want to hear what she comes up with. So honoring that, it's a positive feedback loop instead of always saying, well, we can't do that. And then they kind of go, all right, I won't tell you anything. So I think that's the key, is to honor that little spark, that little thing that feels like, oh, ooh, let's do that. Okay, let's do it.
Brilliant. I love that. What writing advice would you give to others? And I think is your dog doing something? Yeah. Okay.
They have a lot of advice,
Okay.
all kinds of advice. And the animals over the years have definitely shown up in my stories. Um, my advice is to have fun is the most important thing. Tell yourself the stories you want to write and watch out for fear because fear is insidious. It not just the fear of telling some bizarre story, but the fear of what are people going to think? Or I have also included family members in stories. I'll do things like changing the gender or changing the situation in some way. So it'd be very hard to recognize. Some of them have read the stories and didn't pick up on it, which meant I was doing my job. But I also couldn't let that fear stop me. Now, I don't want to be flat out offensive. There are lines I will not cross. I don't want to be a jerk, basically. But I'm not a jerk. So I don't worry about that. I don't think I'm gonna upset people. But don't be afraid is the biggest thing. Don't be afraid to try something different. Don't be afraid to sit down and entertain yourself. Let yourself tell that story. And don't be afraid to ask for help. I mean, there's so much to learn in writing in general, so many techniques and craft ideas and things like pacing or setting or gosh, reading someone like Nora Roberts or Stephen King. They have got so many things under control in their writing that it's you can study their books and you're never going to stop learning.
Mm.
So that don't be afraid to continue to learn, but also don't discount what you can do. That spark of creativity. The idea that you have, okay, yes, of course, everyone's told one person meets another person, they fall in love. How many hundreds of thousands of times, millions of times, probably, but they don't tell it exactly like I do writing that story that day. So that's your voice is what's valuable. Every plot has been written, but your way of telling it, your perspective, your way of seeing the world does have value. So don't let fear stop you from having that out in the world and making that connection with readers who might really need to read that story that day.
Nice. That makes me think, like, is there different advice that you would give someone who like has this like one idea that's like a book burning in their brain versus someone who wants to become like an ongoing author and create many different stories?
That's an interesting and kind of tricky question because I thought that was me when I wrote my first
Oh.
book, Hand-Me-Downs. I thought for one thing, I didn't want to stop because I loved it so much. I enjoyed telling myself the story so much. Well, I don't want this to end. I'm enjoying it. And then, well, okay, I finished it, but I'll tell another book in this same world, which I did. But then it occurred to me, I bet I could look over here and there might be something more interesting, or I could look over there. And it doesn't all have to be fantasy or science fiction. Maybe I'll write crime. I was afraid to write mystery stories. Maybe I'll write those and I write them all the time now. Or maybe I'll try a fantasy story of this kind, or I'll try whatever it is. I'm just going to try it. But also, it's someone who wants to write a memoir, which we have a very good another author in our group, Paula, who wrote a wonderful memoir about her life experiences. Don't feel the pressure that you have to worry about your next book. I guess that'd be the best advice is don't worry about the marketing while you're writing. Never do that. That's two different hats. There's the creativity hat, the writing hat, and then there's the marketing hat. They're completely different, and you shouldn't have them on at the same time because that marketing hat is going to be telling that toddler, "Oh, I don't know, you shouldn't do that. It's going to make it hard." You don't need that. And a very professional and a very important voice, but not while you're writing. So focus on the story you're telling and let yourself tell that story and don't worry about what's going to happen down the road. Just let yourself get into that world that you're creating, whether it's a non-fictional world from your memory or an experience you want to write from history, whatever your nonfiction is. Don't worry about the next story coming down the road and give it your all. Always do the best you can that day. Do the very best you can. That's one of the things that frees me up to move on to the next story is I did the best I could with this story and I'm comfortable with that. So I can let it out into the world and move on to the next one. So yes, focus on what you're doing. And if it turns out to be one book, fantastic. Congratulations. So many people say they want to write a book or think they want to write a book or talk about writing a book. And there's nothing wrong with any of those things because readers are awesome. We want readers. But the few people who finish a book, that's a tremendous accomplishment. So, gosh, don't don't hesitate to really let yourself in and write that book and then see what happens.
Nice. It's good advice. I heard you talk about different genres. How many different genres do you write?
Pretty much anything. Good bit of fantasy, good bit of, this year has been a lot of science fiction for some reason. A lot of mystery and crime where Jason and I are involved in a syndicate, we call it. It's Mystery, Crime, and Mayhem is the magazine. And several of us get together and every quarter we submit a new crime or mystery story. And that's been going on for like 5 years now. Things like this past year, we had a bunch of story calls. I wrote a Regency fantasy, and Regency is something like Bridgerton, which and Regency is really fantasy at its core because that really didn't exist. There weren't that many eligible bachelors and but it's so much fun to escape into that. So she gave us, we had to write a Regency, but we had to then make it actual fantasy with a dragon or some potion. We had, and that was an interesting mashup. And we had to do military science fiction, which I would have told you I cannot, but boy, did I have fun. And now I'm a good ways into a military science fiction novel that was inspired by that. What I try not to do, I try not to limit because, like I said, for a while, there was a part of me was, I cannot possibly write mystery. Mystery is just not, but I was misunderstanding what it was. It's same with certain kinds of fantasy. I was misunderstanding because I just didn't know. And once I started to learn about it and read more books, I was, oh, this is crime fiction. That's all it is. It doesn't have to be a detective, at the police station or Sherlock Holmes with a pipe or whatever it is. It can be any kind of, if there's a crime, it's a mystery story. It can be a cozy, it can be a thriller. And learning about the different subgenres has helped a lot too. Because something like, oh, urban fantasy with, we also write a lot of urban fantasy. It can be anything. It, but it could also go over here and it's sword and sorcery, or it's high fantasy with dragons, and it's just all over the place and all different kinds of romance. So yeah, genres are fun once you start learning more about them. My favorite quote about genres this year is Beyonce's album Cowboy Carter. There's a quote in it from another Black country singer that genres are just funny little things. If you let them, they'll limit you. But don't
Mm,
do that. Write the story first and figure out the genre later. Like I said, that marketing hat is worried about genre. My creative toddler in my head, she doesn't care about genre. She wants to tell the story. Once that story's done, look at it and say, okay, this is what the genre is. This is where it goes on my digital shelf.
nice, nice. Um, how much work is it for you to avoid gatekeepers of publishing?
That's an interesting question because when it comes to longer fiction, novels in particular, I have no desire to go through a traditional publisher, none at all. That I'm completely comfortable doing myself. I prefer to do that myself. And I submit 6 or 8 short stories a week to traditional magazine markets because there's a lot to be gained from that. Think about if I sell a science fiction story to Analog or Asimov's or sell a mystery story to Alfred Hitchcock's or Ellery Queen, which, gosh, that would be great. Not only are a lot of people going to read it, I'm going to get paid. So I'm getting advertising that they pay me for. How cool is that? So that is definitely the goal. And it also it inspires me to write in different directions. I'll see an anthology call or a different magazine that has a themed issue, and oh, I think I could write something for that. So it inspires me to write stories I would never otherwise have. So in that sense, I'm kind of a hybrid in that I have sold I have several professional sales to different markets, and I'm happy to have had that. But I'm careful about my rights because once those stories are sold and they've gone into the markets, I can put them out independently. I've got one I just finished. It's a one of my cat holiday romance stories. And this came out in the professional market a few years ago, but I can produce it myself now. So that's, I do both. And the fun thing about that particular story, because I own all the rights and I have my own web store now, I can do things like a little notebook that go with it. And that's my cat that inspired the story. So, yes, I got paid for this and I got the advertising and I still own most of the rights so I can do things like this. So that's the important part of that. But yeah, I'm happy to give away a certain slice of my rights to let to allow a magazine to put my story out into the world. So that's traditional. That's straight up traditional.
Smart work in the system there. I definitely appreciate that. Um, do you ever get writer's block? If so, what do you do to help yourself?
That's a very tricky concept. My answer until very recently, like a few weeks ago, would have been no, I don't believe in writer's block. Because in my mind, what writer's block meant was I had time to write and sat down at the computer and couldn't think of anything. And that's not the case for me. There's always something I can do. I can always, even if I'm blocked, no, I won't say blocked, even if I'm at a point on a certain story where, I'm not really sure what happens next, I kind of want to step back, I'll go work on another story, often in an entirely different genre, just to give my toddler a chance to digest what she wants to do next in that story. But one of our writing teachers is doing a workshop right now. It's going to end up being 18 weeks altogether about writer's block with all kinds of different definitions. For example, right now, this year, 2024, has been like a steamroller. A lot of us call them life rolls, where you're going along, you're doing great, and something in your life hits you and knocks you off course. 2024 has been one life roll after another for me this year. I'm waiting for this year to go away. So I've been writing a lot less than I would like to, but that's a form of writer's block. If I would prefer to write 2,000 words a day, but I'm down around 500 words a day. And yes, there have been things in this year that reasonably, yeah, that slowed me down, but I want to ramp back up. So what's keeping me from doing that? I haven't missed a day of writing in almost 6 years. So am I blocked? Some people would say, well, of course not. You've been writing, but I'm not doing what I'd like to do. Something is, so there's all kinds of different approaches. Where I think writer's block is dangerous is some people can wear it almost as like a badge of honor. Oh, I've got such horrible writer's block. And I respect that there's so many issues with fear, issues with, there can be depression, there can be, gosh, your life is crazy like mine have been this year. I'm not trying to make fun of people with writer's block at all, but I've known too many writers aspiring writers, who love to talk about writing and love to talk about why they're not writing. And I'm just in the room going, okay, let's sit down and write right now. Oh, no, I've got writer's block. So, and that makes me sad because there's stories that they want to tell that for some reason there's a fear or some kind of issue that's stopping them from doing it. So in the traditional sense, I don't get writer's block. My best advice, I'll get up and go for a walk with the dogs. I'll work on a different story. I'll work on a publishing project. I'll do a cover design. I'll play with doing one of these covers, something like that, to kind of, or a shower is one of the best things in the world. Just get in the shower, and that's when that little toddler will go, oh, how about this? And for a while it was maddening, but I got a scuba board that's designed for riding underwater and hung out of my shower. I said, yeah, bring it. I'll just write it down. So that was very helpful. So yeah, just maybe change your focus, whether it's on another story or, you know, do the laundry or whatever it is. But don't let that be a complete distraction that takes away from your writing time altogether.
Nice, nice. Do you like regularly take classes or participate in workshops or like challenges or something to help keep you going on your writing?
All the time. We started taking workshops really in late 2014 and have pretty much been nonstop ever since. And lots of times those will include a short story. Like there are lots of workshops where at the end of 3 or 6 weeks, okay, turn in a short story and we'll read it, and it may or may even not be for publication. But that's kind of like a mental deadline. And it's that challenge of, oh, this is a genre I never thought of. Let's go do it. So always I'm taking workshops about different areas of craft. Like right now we're doing a writing steampunk workshop, and that writer's block workshop is going on right now. Done cover design workshops, classes about different kinds of publishing. One way we got into having our own store was we took a series of classes about doing a Shopify store. And that was another mental block, was I would really like to sell off my website, but I can't figure that particular thing out. Oh, wait, I can. All I needed was that little crack of, look at this. This is what you can do. And then I guess there must be another machine in my head that's the nerd machine. That's, oh, we can do that. Let's go. So yes, constantly doing different workshops and studying other writers. That's so important. Read a book for pleasure, just for fun, not to study it. But if you close that book and you're like, wow, I love that book. How did they do that? Go back and look through it again and maybe even type the words out on your own computer because you can see things differently that way. So yes, constantly learning. That's one of the best things about this profession is publishing itself is changing all the time. So there's always something new to learn. For me, that's vital because otherwise I'm going to get bored.
Nice, nice. How has identifying as an author and identifying as a minister, how have those two things impacted your life?
I think for both of them, it's an attitude of service. It's an attitude of what can I bring? How can I help you? How can I one of the people who I really have taken class with about writing newsletters, just fan newsletters, is how can I be relentlessly helpful? What can I offer you? Yes, of course, I would love for you to read this newsletter and then click through and buy my book, but that's not the aim of it. The aim is what can I do for you? How can I tell you this story that lifts your day? How can I tell you, I read this great book or watched this great TV show. Maybe you would enjoy it too. Or I've got a new series coming out. Here's a short story that's kind of a sneak peek and it's totally free. So it's service. And the same thing with the ministry. Different volunteer situations I've been in, or even talking to newer writers. I volunteer. Well, I don't volunteer. I'm on the board of our local writers club. And I'll do things like teach classes on a specific genre or a certain aspect of publishing or cover design, whatever it is. Or even doing writing sprints, which we've done here together, which was so much fun, where you just set a timer and start writing. Because of the nerd machine in my head, I'm always taking things in and always learning things. But one of the things I love to do is to share those things. Like right now, I'm also volunteering for Voter Protection Hotline. So, which is vitally important in general, but really important right now. And it's not selfless because I get great pleasure out of being able to answer, my absentee ballot, I've filed for it, but I can't find it. Well, let's go see what we can do. Let me help you. So it's an attitude of service in both cases. And it's also, there are gatekeepers involved in both of those places. There are gatekeepers saying, oh, you can't be a minister because you're not of this background, or you're the wrong gender, or there's something about you. You haven't done all these things, so you can't be a minister. Watch me. And the same with writing. Well, you don't have an English degree, you don't have an MFA, you haven't gone through all these hoops. I think I can, and I'm going to do it. So it's a determination to be of service in whatever form that takes.
Nice. I like that attitude. Thanks. So, with that, what have you done as a minister since becoming one?
As far as traditional, not that much. A few weddings, just a few services here and there, but it's mainly been for me that attitude of service. I felt when my mother-in-law was in assisted living with her dementia, one of the things I spent a lot of time doing was volunteering at the assisted living facility. Things like taking them on a shopping trip, which was such an adventure to, ride on the little bus and go to wherever it was and work with the whole group. And that was the attitude of service. That was me ministering to that group of people. Um, we have a loved one who was wanting to go through gender transition and scared to death to do so. And they chose to talk to me first out of everybody in the family. And knowing that person and knowing the situation, if they hadn't been able to talk to me, I don't know that they would have lived. I don't know that they would have survived. That's definitely an act of service. Um, Being able to help family members. Right now, we're going through the transition of a death in the family that has affected all of us deeply. And the simple act of listening to somebody talk about it, or, hey, this last book of this person just came out, let me get you one. And the simple fact of making sure his literary legacy stays alive. That's also an act of service. So that's been a huge part of it. And also being an example to people that, hey, I am secular as they come. I am definitely not what most people would, I'm not a religious person, but I can still have a ministry. I can have that ministry take a form that suits me and suits the people around me who need that. The same with writing. Well, yeah, I am approaching it in a different way than you might know, but it can be done. So those are my main aspects of it. I would be happy to do more traditional roles, but when that opportunity, until that opportunity presents itself, I will fulfill that as it makes sense.
Nice, nice. What would you like to share with others who identify as non-spiritual about being a minister?
I would say look at that original definition. Um, to minister is to provide a service. To minister is to provide support or comfort. It doesn't have to be. Now, where I live in the mountains in Appalachia, there's a real specific idea of a minister. It's very enthusiastic, one might say, and sadly can be stereotyped, which is unfortunate as well. But you don't have to be that. You don't have to be a priest. You don't have to be in arraignment. You don't have to do all those things. We can have this community that we're in right now. We can have the ability to help other people. We may have an opportunity to speak right now at a school board meeting or a town council meeting and just say, hey, we're here. Don't assume that everybody feels the same way. And please don't exclude people based on such a personal choice as how they see the world and how they interact with the world. So I think it's vitally important. That's one reason something like the Madonna Mystery is so important, is this community exists not to be exclusionary, but to include. So I would say, just like I would say to a writer, don't assume that there's not a place for you. Don't assume that if you have this desire to minister to people or to animals or to the environment, whatever it is, don't assume that it's not possible just because you don't check that box.
Thank you. So, what can the Madonna Ministry community do to support you as a non-spiritual minister?
A big part of it is having this space, having this community, having this, um, the weekly or however often people can make it, the chance to be in community, the chance to have this social aspect that is a part of religion, an organized religion, is having a social space. But that's also available to us here. And keeping those doors open, keeping those walls down so we can invite other people. I think it's important to think about language. Again, a writer's going to say that, don't assume that anybody who's a minister is religious, or that, like I said, the invocation at a city hall meeting, it's not all going to be in the name of a specific God. It may be, we're thankful to live in this beautiful place. Let's see what we can do to make this hiking trail available to everybody without, you don't have to invoke that traditional religious structure. I mean, it's in a certain setting, it's perfectly fine, but be aware of not excluding people, which Madonna Ministry is wonderful at. That's one reason I feel comfortable here, because there have been other opportunities I've had, and it feels like, we're going to put up walls unless you like our words, unless you like our structure, you don't belong here. And I don't get that here at all. So that's so important.
Is that part of what keeps you connected with the Madonna Ministry and coming back?
Definitely. And of course, the personal relationships and the interactions that we have available, and wanting to be that example, wanting to show the way. that kind of like showing the way in my family. There are a couple of younger people in my family who would love to do more of a creative career, but until they can see an example of it, it may not occur to them that they can. So it's twofold. It's definitely, the connections I feel to people here and the interactions we've had and getting to learn more about everybody here and what we all have to offer. So yeah, there's a lot that keeps me coming. A lot of it is the fact that there's a welcome here, which is too often missing from other situations like this.
Nice, nice. I feel like I went kind of over the predicted time of Nikki for just solely asking you questions. So I definitely want to, in the last 15 minutes, open it up to other people to be able to ask you questions. Um, so take it away, community.
Thank you,
I have
Kari.
a
That was
question.
awesome.
Oh, I have a question. Have you ever written a book expressing non-faith and services? You know what I mean? No, you don't know what I mean.
I do.
Uh,
I have no idea what you mean.
okay. Have you ever felt a calling to do that? Because there are many people I would think that need to hear that lesson.
There was one again, it was an odd little story that I had the idea. I walked outside in town one day a few years ago, and there was music coming from nowhere. It was just, okay, why is there music in the air? And I thought, oh, we're being attacked by earworms. Music that gets in your head and you can't get rid of it. And that turned into a whole story where the town was being attacked by earworms. But there was a character in that story who was one might call a witch because she had worked with nature and works with the moonlight and works with rain and crystals and things. But I also portrayed that she is in community with the religious leaders in their town. She is involved with, it's a whole group and they minister to the town together. And her way of ministering to the town is different, but equal. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that she and the way and she's shown up in several other stories. I love her. The way she ministers to the town, if she will connect with nature or she will connect with whatever it is the person needs. If there's a ghost in this enchanted little town that needs to pass on, she's the one who will connect with that ghost and make sure they can move on and be satisfied and quit tormenting the town. She had to banish the earworms because they were driving everybody crazy. Or there was another story of a coal
So,
miner trapped in a mine. He had passed on many, many years ago, but he was trapped there and he was miserable and he kept trying to pull other people down into the mine to have some company. Where it was, things like car wrecks and mine disasters and people drowning. And some of the characters had to help him get out. They had to move him and let him pass on so the town could be free of that. So it's different ways of finding what is needed and approaching it in a different way. Does that answer? Is that what you meant?
Yeah, yeah. Do you ever get feedback from anyone that resonated with them?
I have gotten people
Okay.
talked about, I love seeing the different point of view. I love seeing, or with romances, because I'll write romances, with two men, two women, all I have not, I don't have any boundaries on that. And I've definitely had people say, thank you for bringing that perspective. Thank you for child free. We don't have kids, which can be kind of it's an interesting choice right now in our culture. That's all I'll say. I am a child free cat lady right here. All I'll say. But just having that perspective of people who have children in their lives, because the children in our family members in our have been so important, and I hope I've been important to them, that we play a part in parenting. We're part of that village that helps raise children. So yeah, I do get people saying thank you for bringing a different perspective.
And that must make you feel rewarded.
It really does because it's part of that service, being able to see yourself. I want people to feel seen. That's so, like the representation in different movies and TV shows where not everybody looks the same and not everybody's from the same background. That's so important. Like seeing Princess Leia when I was a little 6 or 7 year old kid and she was the hero. That was a big deal. And that's the kind of thing I want to do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to mention something, if I may. Yeah, first of all, I really love your enthusiasm and your found your purpose for being here. And I think for me, that's honoring whatever you want to call it, God, the thing itself within yourself. And I think you're a living example of that. And I thank you. Question, I'm glad to see that you, with your passion, you would do workshops and do writers clubs, so you grow in your profession. Question I have is, do you do any research on your projects?
That's a very good question. And one thing I will say that I forgot to mention earlier is the way I see divinity for me is creativity. That is the divine for me, being able to create something. So yes, it fits very well here. I've written several historical stories, and yes, I do quite a bit of research for that. I have a series that's set in Victorian England, but it's also got a lot of magic. So that ends up doing a lot of research. I've written some World War II stories, end up doing a lot of research for those. Or if I'm writing like a here and now real life crime fiction story, I'll do some research into police procedures or things like that. We've taken workshops with actual police officers to learn how these things and how they would like to be portrayed. So yes, I do a good bit of research, and that can be a lot of fun. And then once that project's done, I'm probably going to want to write a fantasy story while I can just make it up, just to balance.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
So I guess you kind of answered the question. What brought you into the Madonna Ministry International?
I was ordained with Anya McAndrew in 2001. And that was my first involvement. And I was in Nicole Christine's last circle. I guess that was probably 2002. And that was the ordination process with the previous version of the Madonna Ministry. So I was ordained with that. And then, gosh, it's been a few years. I can't even remember. I wanted to reconnect and looked up and saw that that you all were having these services online, which was a great opportunity because where we live, religion is quite traditional. And the Commonwealth of Virginia, for example, since the 1600s, unless you have a brick and mortar church, you can't do things like weddings. The Commonwealth is very strict. So it was so refreshing to find out, oh, this is available. Like I said, those open doors. So that was what drew me originally, and then what brought me back was wanting to find, are there still people like me out here? Yes, there are. So I was happy to find this group.
That's wonderful. There's only one creator, and you're honoring that creator by being creative. And what gets in the way of so many religions is religiosity, which is adherence to dogma. They make dogma more important than love, dogma more important than happiness, dogma more important than healing. And that's the failure of religions. But the beautiful part of religions is the people that get in touch with their creativity and live their passion.
That makes a lot of sense for religion and with writing. There's a lot of dogma in writing that you have to do this and you have to do this and you have to do this. Actually, no, you don't. You have to outline, or you have to have an English degree, or no, I never outline ever. And just being free of that dogma is a big part opening your creativity. So yes, that's a great tie-in. Thank you.
Yeah, part of the dogma in education, right? I need a license. I need a doctorate degree. I need this before I can do that. Well, Shirley has mentored a lot of people and she has counseled a lot of people, and she doesn't have any degrees, and she's helped a lot of people. And that's what our ministry is all about. And it's all right to have a license. It's good at that. You feel you need that support. But honor the presence of creativity in oneself, not be held back by fear that you're not doing it right. You're a great example of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think too that with the veil thinning and more people embracing the possibility that spirituality, the energy of all things, all that is literally being confirmed from scientists now. But I'm thinking from your standpoint, Kari, you've talked about being in humanism, and that's about caring for people and the rights of everybody to be equal in the say of what their future is. And so from the perspective of the spiritual, I've done some research on NDEs and mediumship and speaking from those that from beyond. But what they always bring it back to is that we're here in this body to have an experience and to learn lessons in this lifetime, in this meat suit, if you want to call it that. And we can choose the divinity or the creativity or the unconditional love and actually manifest our reality. And so I'm loving in your storytelling and the way that you develop these stories that you literally are manifesting this way of entertaining people for the good of all. And so to me, that is as deep as it goes. So thank you for your service.
Thank you. Thank you. And that does bring up another fun part about writing is I get to live all these lives, even if it's just for a minute, even if
Yep.
it's just for a few hours or a few weeks while I'm writing a story. Same as when you read a story. I mean, I've lived these science fiction worlds and fantasy worlds. Like I mentioned Star Wars. I've been Princess Leia, especially when I was 7 years old and things like that. But I get that experience as a writer as well, is so many different lifetimes and perspectives and points of view. And being able to share that it's a gift. It's a gift for me. And I hope a gift for other people.
The one thing I'd like to say before we close is that since we are considered a religion and we do perform ordinations and consecrations and baptisms, etc., that what I've learned, it's not about dogma. It's not about reading a ritual and it has to be done the same way all the time. What it means is to honor that creative blessing that's coming through you to bless somebody else in whatever form it takes, whatever words you use, however you're dressed is appropriate. What's important is you're living your creativity and blessing another person in a way that's meaningful to both of you.
I love that. That makes a lot of sense. That was always in my first statements when I was starting the priestess process it was right there that creativity is what I was reaching for the whole time. It just took me time to make that connection of that is service. That is a ministry. So that's perfect.
Thank you. And thank you, B. Great questions. I
Yes,
had questions to ask and you asked all of them. It was really good.
Thank you all so much. This was a pleasure.
Thank you, Kari.
What are we doing next week? No?
Next week is interview number 3. And Kari, if you would reach out to Laura, see if she's prepared to be interviewed.
Sure, I'll be happy to.
You two would be up next and we can carry on from there. Then Terry comes the following week and then we can revisit who's next on the interview spectrum. Because I think these podcasts are going to be a good way for the ministry to get the voice out there and get more eyeballs onto this this path, because we've got fresh new content, new perspectives with AI repurposing some of the stuff we've done. I do invite you to go to the podcast channel because the Brothers of the Grape podcast is up now. So take a look at that because it's a good overview of people talking about the book and not necessarily interpreting the book. They're just saying what resonated with them. And granted, it is AI voices, so be aware. It's not quite as heartfelt as humans talking, but it's pretty darn close. And I thought they captured a lot that was really relevant about the book.
Yes, I've listened to it. It's wonderful. And thank you for doing that. That's part of your mission.
Yeah, yeah. Getting the word out, getting eyeballs on it, repurposing everything we do here. It's just so much easier these days. So I'm grateful as well. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Kari, for being interviewed. It was such a pleasure. And
Yeah.
thanks for your service.
Thank you. You as well. Thank you.
All right. Have a wonderful week, everybody.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Welcome, Katrina. We're going to post some videos and pictures as soon as we get them. Your service was beautiful.
Thank you.
All
Bye,
right.
everybody.
Have a wonderful week.
Have a blessed week.
Blessings.
Love you all.